There is a kind of fatigue that you can't see, a mental exhaustion that builds up in someone who lives waiting for others to notice, recognize, understand, or reciprocate their care. Sometimes it starts early, when, as a child, you learn that being loved requires pleasing others. Other times, it grows out of repeated disappointment. You give your best and receive silence in return. Gradually, a seed of doubt takes root. Doubt about what you feel, doubt about your worth, doubt about who you are. And the danger isn't just in the doubt itself, it's that, when left unexamined, doubt becomes habit. A habit of seeking validation for every breath you take. A habit of needing someone to tell you you're right before you grant yourself peace. And the most subtle part of all, this doesn't feel unhealthy at first. It feels like connection, like care, like empathy. But over time, it turns into emotional dependence. The line between genuine connection and emotional neediness is delicate, especially for sensitive adults who equate empathy with self-abandonment. You shape yourself around what others seem to need, hoping they'll notice what you don't verbalize, hurting when their responses don't match what you hoped for. And then, when someone reacts with indifference or neutrality, you assume something is wrong with you, but it isn't. The problem is trying to fill an inner void with external affirmation. No amount of approval from others will ever give you what you have not first learned to give yourself. Marcus Aurelius lived under constant scrutiny. As emperor, every decision was analyzed, questioned, commented on. Still, in his private reflections, he did not write to please anyone. He wrote to remind himself of who he was, to align his choices with his values, not with others' expectations. He said that dignity does not come from applause, it comes from coherence, from the quiet peace of someone who knows why they act as they do, and therefore does not lose themselves when no one else approves. Epictetus put it even more plainly: depending on others' opinions is giving away your freedom. Without noticing, you start reacting to others as a reflection, never as an authentic presence. Your emotional security gets decided outside yourself. You feel good with praise, bad with indifference, strong when accepted, fragile when critiqued, and in this back and forth, you lose what was most precious, your own center of decision about who you are. This conversation is about exactly that, the difference between seeking connection and begging for validation, about the risk of living in a state of perpetual expectation for approval instead of gradually rebuilding quiet self-respect. This isn't about closing off or pretending not to care, it's about learning to offer to yourself the recognition you have long waited for from others, because emotional dignity is not something you ask for, it is something you sustain, quietly, within yourself. There is something that feels perfectly human about wanting to be understood, to hear, "You're right, I would have felt that way too." At first, that kind of acknowledgement brings relief, a sense that you are not alone, that your inner world has meaning to someone else. But when this seeking becomes constant, when your choices are measured by how much validation you receive, something subtle begins to warp. Your security starts depending on another's response. What once felt like sensitivity slowly becomes emotional fragility. This pattern is quiet but persistent. You make a decision, feel uncertain, then look for someone to confirm that you made the right choice. If they support you, there is relief. If they criticize or remain silent, doubt and anxiety rise. The brain learns this pattern too. I need someone to validate me before I can feel at peace. That reinforcement, unintentional though it may be, pulls you further away from yourself, because your internal compass, the one meant to guide your choices, begins to cede control to the emotional GPS of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote every day not to gain acceptance, but to remind himself of what mattered. His journal was not a public manifesto, it was an anchor. He understood that an untrained mind drifts into reacting to others' judgments, so he practiced realignment rather than approval-seeking. This matters because while many try to persuade others of their choices, he worked to stay true to his own convictions. We've all experienced moments like this. You share something expecting empathic listening, and what you receive feels cold or indifferent. Even if the situation hasn't changed, you feel worse, more exposed, more vulnerable. It feels as if your experience has been rejected. But maybe the problem wasn't the other person's response, but the expectation of being comforted at all costs. When you speak to be seen rather than simply to express, every silence cuts deep. There is a way to interrupt this cycle. Create a small pause before you speak, a moment of honest self-questioning. What am I actually seeking here? If the answer is clarity, expression, or connection, then speak. If it is approval, certainty, or emotional relief, perhaps silence holds more strength, not because speaking is wrong, but because speaking in search of something only you can give yourself is a sure path to frustration. Over time, that subtle adjustment changes everything. The tension lessens, emotions settle, because slowly, you stop waiting for others to determine what already belongs to you. The right to feel, to choose, and to uphold with quiet dignity the person you are becoming. Little by little, almost without noticing, you begin to shape your speech, your thinking, your stance, to avoid losing acceptance. You adjust tone, soften words, change posture. At first it feels like kindness, sensitivity, or flexibility, but over time, you realize you've lived measuring reactions, anticipating judgments, and fishing for approval even before finishing a thought. And the price of that pattern is high. Your opinion remains present, but your internal axis becomes fragile. The danger lies in repetition. Small concessions that go unnoticed but gradually erode your self-respect. No one moment betrays you. You simply adapt too much. You compromise truth for belonging, and what once seemed like safety becomes a silent abandonment of parts of yourself. Epictetus warned that someone who tries to please everyone ends up belonging to no one, including themselves. Each time you weaken your internal standards to be understood, something slips away. You are still there, but less whole. You speak more cautiously, you act more hesitantly, and after every exchange, you carry a subtle discomfort, a sense that you over-explained, overshared, or allowed too much of your inner self to depend on someone who was never meant to hold that responsibility. This pattern shows up everywhere, among friends, at work, in intimate moments with those you trust most. You find yourself explaining emotions, justifying choices, trying to prove your reasonableness. What should have been a sharing turns into a negotiation of identity, and what exhausts you isn't the effort to be understood, it's the feeling that you must constantly prove you deserve to be. The solution isn't isolation. It's not becoming hardened. It's reclaiming your own center, speaking less, explaining less, choosing more, even in silence, if that's what the situation genuinely demands. Reducing emotional exposure, not out of coldness, but out of care for your wholeness. And before every choice, asking yourself, if no one approved of this, would I still choose it? If the answer is yes, you're on the path toward real self-respect. If it's no, you may still be trying to fit into a place that can't hold your full truth. There is a misconception many carry unconsciously, that stopping the search for emotional validation means becoming cold, distant, or even selfish, that giving up dependence on others' opinions is a withdrawal from connection. But the truth runs deeper. Seeking constant approval doesn't strengthen bonds, it weakens them. Because when your emotional stability is tied to others' responses, even the most sincere relationships become sources of tension. What some interpret as coldness is really internal stability. It isn't detachment. It is presence grounded in self-understanding. And that kind of alignment, born from values rather than reactions, lightens relationships, precisely because you're no longer carrying the weight of needing to be understood at every moment. Marcus Aurelius navigated an empire without imagining he could please everyone. He knew that any decision, no matter how fair, would attract criticism. Yet he grounded his actions in principles, and that's what shapes transformation. When your choices arise from within, applause becomes optional. It can happen, but it no longer defines you. In everyday life, this internal alignment shows itself in subtle ways. You no longer feel compelled to share every detail. You speak less out of a need for reassurance and more out of a sense of completeness. You don't avoid others, but you stop allowing them to shoulder your emotional security. There is a question that reshapes your relationship with your own decisions. Does this choice honor my values? If yes, you can proceed with peace. even in the absence of recognition? If no, maybe silence is more powerful than any attempt to fit, convince, or adjust. Over time, this quiet alignment transforms relationships. Bonds built from your wholeness are steadier, less tense, less demanding, less fragile. Because someone who stands without craving validation inspires respect, not pleading. Deeper. Seeking validation is not a moral fault. It is a learned habit, a reflex that forms early when acceptance equals security. For a while, that strategy works, but in adulthood, it can erode what matters most. Each effort to please chips away at who you really are, and even when validation comes, it never quite fills the internal gap you're trying to patch. Marcus Aurelius, under immense pressure and isolation, didn't pursue acceptance, he pursued coherence. He didn't want everyone to agree with him, he wanted to be true to himself. That consistency, sustained in silence, became his strength. Epictetus reminded us that freedom begins when we stop allowing others to decide our worth. When you need praise to feel complete, you're always vulnerable. But when your peace comes from within, even the silence of others is no threat. You are present, whole, and that presence transforms everything. A new definition of respect emerges. Not how much others admire you, but how peacefully you act without applause, without reaction, without external validation. That's where self-respect begins. When you stop explaining every step, defending every feeling, seeking reassurance at every turn, because you have listened enough to yourself to know where you stand. And someone who knows where they stand isn't shaken by a twisted look or an offhand comment. In the end, letting go of the search for validation isn't withdrawal, it's rediscovery. It's stopping the begging for confirmation and starting the stewardship of your own life. It's shedding fear of misinterpretation in favor of living fully in your own skin. And when that shift happens, something changes, not in others, but in the silent space between you and the world, that place where dignity lives first, and the need for approval gradually stops having power.